Happy now? Back in 2024, I was a DM for my group of friends, and it was the first time I had ran a long-term campaign for anyone. And it went well. I feel like there are going to be three types of people who watch this video, either new DMs looking for advice, experienced DMs looking to absolutely ruin me in the comments, or players who just want to laugh at my misery. If you're nervous about DMing the first time, then watch this video and just do the exact opposite of everything I did. Because to be honest, I don't think I could have done anything worse. To start with, I homebrewed everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. The places, the monsters, the characters, the story, the everything to do with this campaign. Did I mention that this was the first time I was running a game? I wanted to write a campaign that was massively focused around fae and folklore, since I just think it's funny how we used to attribute natural phenomena to a magical seahorse that if you sit on it you get stuck unless you can answer its riddles 3, and if you don't answer its riddles 3 properly it fucking removes your spine. I know there's plenty of adventures in D&D that are pre-written, that have characters and monsters and all this that are entirely based around the fae, but I, as someone who has done creative writing ever since I was 15, really wanted to make my own thing. I'm not going to shill out £30 on a book that tells me how to write a story when I have my brain and Google Docs. So I get an idea in my head, I quickly write out a synopsis, give it to my players, and let them create their characters. To summarise what I gave them, there is a city called Canilou, which is essentially London without all the knife crime. It's ridiculously expensive to live there, but at least it'll be a nice stay. The biggest thing to happen in the however many years people have been living there was a witch was practicing black magic, but she was arrested and exiled out of the city, and everyone just kind of forgot about it until 4 years later when a forest erupted from outside the city, consuming 1/6 of it. This wasn't just any forest, it was a weird, twisted, magical type of forest, with trees that contorted in weird ways and glowed with strange auras. People tried everything to remove it, from chopping down the trees, to burning down the trees, to trying to use magic to seal it away, but nothing they did would work. Anytime they got rid of a tree, 2 more sprouted. Being out of options, the royal family decreed that a few people would be sent into the forest in order to find a way to get rid of it. However, only one of them came out of it, and he appeared to have completely lost his mind, babbling on about satyr and fae and creatures that only move when you look away, and a witch. The witch. The bounty was immediately doubled and would be given to anyone or any party who could return with the witch's head. The party would start out not knowing each other, and they get 10 minutes of dialogue right at the start of the first session in order to get to know each other's characters while they were being transported from the meetup point to the actual forest. Speaking of which, Lilith Orlander is an elf fighter whose village was destroyed as a consequence of the Fey Forest. Essentially how he explained it was the Fey Forest led some orcs to somewhere where they shouldn't be, and then they came out of the forest, raided the village, and it was all destroyed. He managed to escape, but he was raised in the woods by wolves. He was surprisingly well-mannered for someone who was raised in the forest by wolves. Due to a fuck-up in later sessions, he is simultaneously both 5 years old and 90 years old. I'll get to that. Or maybe I won't, maybe I'll just forget to explain that bit, who knows? Henry Zalaria is a human cleric, but because my Baldur's Gate character was also a cleric, I always just imagined him as a halfling cleric, so sorry, Henry, but you're short. Marius Enrique is a human rogue who likes to sword fight. That's about it. Ludwig von Bonatwonk is a human rogue who was German until he hit his head too hard and he became British.
I am Ludwig von Bonatwonk, Inquisitor Extraordinaire, from the Church of God's Name, who I totally forgot. Of course, my good man, don't worry, I've killed literally millions of women before. I think I know what that's strange, I hit my head during the crash, I should have changed accent.
He's also a scientist and a witch hunter. The idea is that all of these characters will be meeting for the first time on the way to the Fey Forest, and that's why we would have the 10 minutes of introductory speech. I only knew about Lilith and Marius prior to the campaign because my friends told me about them. Henry and Ludwig were complete surprises, which don't do that. I never really got over the fact that 75% of the party were just generic white guys, and 2 of them were rogues, but it was very nearly a case of having 4 rogues. Marius and Ludwig were, of course, already rogues, but Henry and Lilith were also very likely to pick rogues, and nearly did. Both Henry and Lilith mained rogues in different games. Henry played Hearthstone and mained the rogue there, and Lilith mained the rogue in Baldur's Gate 3. Mained the Rogue sounds like a band or something. This is my party of travelling bards. We're called Mained the Rogue. As much as it would have been tragic and hilarious to have 75% of the party be rogues, I think it would have actually done Henry a lot of good because it became an inside joke as to how fucking useless Henry was. First off, Henry only had a 7 in strength, meaning his weapon only dealt 1d6 minus 2 damage. This was his only weapon until session 5. I actually ran the math on how likely Henry was to deal any form of damage to any enemy in this campaign, and it ranged from 11% to 19% provided he got the hit and the damage roll correct. Chances are he'd either completely miss the enemy, or he would hit them and then deal no damage.
Zipping around like
He did it! Can't kill it though. Roll for damage. You don't even damage it.
Spider should get that much health.
Oh my god.
Yeah, because
man.
I am meant to be a healer, so I guess that makes sense.
it is his most efficient healing.
But I mean, even if you did want to do it that way, then the spider doesn't heal anything because it's still on full fucking health.
No, it goes beyond.
It gets temporary hit points.
But I mean, he's a cleric, right? Clerics aren't really necessary for attacking. They're support classes, they're healers, they provide buffs. Not Henry. His only spells were Mending, Lights, and Dancing Lights, along with a once per long rest chromatic orb. No idea how he's achieved this. Should I have an idea how he achieved this? Yes, that's what a session 0 is for. This has resulted in probably the funniest clip I have ever got in a playthrough of anything that I have done with my friends.
Can I roll persuasion to like go? Ah, look over there! Look at it! Look at
the madman.
You're the one who did this.
You can try, but I'd say at disadvantage since he's already very convinced that you've done this.
Listen, I'm on 1 HP.
Any opportunity. You could,
The maximum
attack
damage-
the thing.
The maximum damage I can do is 4.
Do you not have like a hammer or something? Like a war
I
hammer?
have a mace with fucking -2 on strength.
Man is not a war cleric.
No,
boy.
I'm meant to be the healer.
Do you have healing spells?
That's an excellent question for the healer.
You're the healer without healing spells.
Go kick out medical
I
school.
have pretty lights and I have mending.
Yes, I 100% should have given him the ability to redo his character sheet. He didn't even need to fix his character. I could just plot convenience some spell scrolls or a better weapon into his hands, rather than just making him sit with it until session 5, but I was new and I was nervous and I didn't want to make things too easy, so instead, fuck you, you get a useless member of the party. So, lesson number 1, always have a session 0. Even if you want your party going in nearly entirely blind, always have a session 0 so you don't end up with a party of 4 rogues or a healer who can't heal. So we get to the entrance of the Fey Forest, and they really want a royal horse. Like, really, really, really want a royal horse, to the point where they harassed the guy who took them there to give them one of the horses for about 3 rolls. It was a solid, 10 minutes of them trying to negotiate the horse out of this guy's hands. It didn't work. Then I make probably the dumbest mistake I have ever made in a D&D campaign. I didn't prepare a map. I'm not kidding. They enter the Fey Forest, and I just didn't have a map prepared. What was I thinking? When they enter the Fey Forest, they realize that it feels like they've been dropped directly into the middle of it, rather than coming into an entrance and being able to see the exit right behind them. As soon as they walk in, it's like they're immediately surrounded by miles and miles and miles of forest. And all of a sudden, they start realizing that going into this Fey Forest probably wasn't the best of ideas. But don't worry, a fairy is here to lighten the mood. Marianne Sparkle Bumbleshine was by far my favourite character to play in this whole thing. She was an absolute chatterbox, and the party very willingly handed over most of their names to her, which was great. For me, that is. Not that it mattered, because they didn't actually go to the Fey Kingdom like Marianne Sparkle Bumbleshine told them to. She comes in, asks what their names are, and gives them direction to get to the Fey Kingdom, where they'll set them up with a whole bunch of stuff and forward the plot. But fuck the plot, we don't need the plot, we're here to kill the witch! This is going to become a running theme. The idea behind the Fey Forest, it was meant to be all weird and warpy and strange. It would do strange things in the middle of combat, and there would be all these interesting areas that I'd be able to plot different battlefields in that we'll talk about when we get to them. What annoys me is I never really did anything with the Fey Forest. What I wish I'd done is while fighting or walking around, they would be randomly jumped between different areas. The initial idea was to actually have them teleport if they ever lost sight of the party. So for example, you walk behind a tree, and then everyone loses sight of you, you lose sight of everyone, and then you pop out somewhere completely different. This would have made combat actually interesting and difficult in certain places. Did I do that? Nope. I completely forgot about it. I I forgot that was a mechanic that I even wanted to implement, and it never really came up because all of the maps that I made were generally just linear paths. Two of the tabletop girlies, as we now call ourselves, left to go get food while the other two tried to start a fire in order to attract an Ent, and this is where I make fuck up number 2 of not keeping accurate notes. They didn't attract an Ent, but the fire certainly caught the attention of a satyr, who they called Mr. Tumnus, after Mr. Tumnus in The Lion Witch in the Wardrobe. What annoys me is that the satyr's motivation for fighting didn't make any sense whatsoever. Keep in mind that every creature they see from this point onward has been in this Fey Forest pretty much their entire lives, or has been sent into this Fey Forest for over a decade. In the lore of this campaign, I stated that the forest couldn't be burnt down, and this satyr, who has lived here his whole life, would very clearly know that. So why the hell did he get pissed at the party for trying to start a fire and burn the forest down when he knows that the forest can't be burnt down? Poor planning. Anyway, Mr. Tumnus nearly solos Ludwig and Henry, literally downing Henry partway through the fight until Lilith returns from eating food and snipes him down with a single shot from his arrow, which is mildly impressive. Henry also used up his only chromatic orb until we long rest, so let's hope that they just don't encounter anything stronger than the satyr. Lesson 2, write yourself notes, important information, and little details just to make sure you remember them so you don't have stupid situations like a satyr getting pissed that a forest is being burnt down that he knows can't be burnt down. The party reaches a deep dark part of the forest. It was quite literally called the Deep Dark. This part of the campaign actually pulled from a dream I had where there was this dark forest with bits of moonlight that cut through the canopy. Essentially, when you walk into the forest, you are completely blinded, however, you can still see the pools of moonlight. If you walk into the pool of moonlight, it's like how you would see it from the outside. The enemy, as well, was also heavily inspired by this dream. The idea behind the enemy was the typical Weeping Angel Slender Man type deal, where it can't move as long as you're looking at it, but as soon as you look away, it can move very quickly. This, however, was poorly planned. The idea behind this encounter was the party would have to go from pool of moonlight to pool of moonlight in order to keep their eyes on the actual enemy, and if they didn't and they were caught in the darkness, they wouldn't be able to see him and therefore he'd be able to strike. However, only putting one of these guys in combat was a massive oversight, because that meant at least one person could just stick in a pool of moonlight and wait for the other party members to move, and then they could move following after it while the other party members keep their eye on the monster. Eventually, I realized that this encounter was incredibly easy. I mean, it literally required one person to just keep their eye on the enemy the entire time, and then the other two could just do whatever they wanted. So I ended up throwing a couple of phase spiderlings at them to try and rough them up a bit and keep their eyes off the main threat. This would not be the last time I just throw phase spiderlings at the party in order to give them something to do. I don't diversify my enemies much. I had a full booklet of about 20 enemies, and I used maybe 4. Because of the nature of this enemy, it resulted in the party literally having to look away from it in order for it to move closer to them so they would actually be close enough for them to hit it and get on with the fight. It was slow, it was grueling, and Marius decided he wanted to end the session halfway through the fucking fight. I'm still salty about that, Marius. So we ended up having to finish the fight next session, but the ending of the fight was actually quite good and it was exactly what I hoped for. Ludwig was able to make the next session, so he joined in the fight partway through, and the creature ended up downing him and dropping him to 2 failed death saves. This presented a bit of a predicament for the party. I altered the creature's behavior so that if someone was close enough, regardless of whether they were looking at him or not, he would be able to attack them. The creature was stood next to Ludwig's slowly dying body. However, because the party was looking at it, he couldn't move. And because Ludwig was slowly dying, the party wanted to go over and rescue him. Slight issue with that. To go over and rescue him, they would have to use a dash action so they wouldn't be in the darkness for too long, and then they would have to use another action to pick Ludwig up, in which case the monster would be close enough to them that they would be able to attack the person rescuing Ludwig. How did my illustrious party solve this? They grabbed the nearest weapons and armaments they had and started chucking them at the creature until eventually they landed a lucky hit and it got knocked over and died. At least Ludwig made it out alive. They decided to follow a sign that says survivors go this way, don't follow any other path, which they trust completely, but then again, if you're in a magical Fey forest where everything is trying to kill you, maybe one sign that says go this way and don't go any other direction might just lead to something nice. As they follow that path, they're intercepted by an injured phase hound, and while they try to tame it, they fail massively, fucking up 2 animal handling rolls and resulting in them just having to kick the shit out of it until it dies. Upon doing so, Lilith loots the body and finds a piece of tattered red cloth in the phase hound's jaw. Both Lilith and Marius have a go at identifying it, but neither of them can identify where it came from. so they just randomly guess that it might be the barbarians. And they are completely right. When they first arrived outside the Fey Forest, they saw 2 other parties, one of them which was just a generic party, and another one which had a couple of barbarians and a couple of fighters in it that charged in without listening to anything that their guide was saying. The red cloth wasn't actually part of the barbarians' original armor. There was going to be this whole plot line where they discover a cult which worships a cockatrice, and the uniforms of the guardsmen actually had that red cloth attached to it. So they were correct because the barbarians did become part of this cult of worshipping the cockatrice, but at the same time, technically they weren't because the barbarians didn't wear that red cloth. But also as a fun bit of trivia for you, if they helped the Facehound would have actually come up later in the story and helped them out of a tough situation if they needed it. It would be kind of my little Deus Ex Machina where I could be like, look, the Facehound you saved is coming back to protect you and it's all nice and friendly now you have a pet Facehound. Shame it fucking died. Lesson 3. Don't hold back in your encounters. I could have easily doubled the enemy count in this and they still would have made it out perfectly fine. And if things do go wrong, just plot convenience your way out. Oh no, you're about to die and everything is going wrong. Don't worry, a survivor is here to come and help you. Use the power of plot convenience. So they escape the deep dark forest and come to a survivor's village where they are met by the village protector, Argus. Would it shock you if I said that this entire thing was very poorly planned? Argus is a very friendly and jovial dwarf paladin with an infectious Scottish accent, because everyone in the village slowly started turning Scottish. He shows them around the village, showing them the blacksmith, the potion shop, the house of healing, and the inn, where they were allowed to stay. The inn is run by 2 tieflings, a husband and wife duo with their baby child. Henry was apparently racist towards tieflings, but nothing ever came of this. He still ate their food, he still slept in their accommodations, he still treated them like he would treat literally anyone else in this campaign. The entirety of next session was literally only an hour long, and it was just them hanging around the village and doing things. Marius and Argus have a duel, and then they go to the potion shop to meet up with the potion seller, who is a butch orc woman. This is how I found out that Marius is very much into butch women.
Do we need any potions?
I mean, you can go to the potion shop if you want.
You'd have to encounter the Scottish orc again.
Yeah, that's kind of why I want to go. I just wanted a reason to go. I just wanted, if someone wanted a potion, then I'll like 2 birds
Marius,
one stone.
I'll go with
Sweating
you. I'll be your
profusely. Does anyone want any potions?
We see Marius with red liquids dripping from his mouth, with an empty bottle in his hand. Oh, guys, we're out of potions. We need to get more.
A strange singing is then heard throughout the village, which causes everyone to kind of zone out and zone back in suddenly. It's as if something happened and they just kind of forgot. A splash is heard coming from the well, so they decide to go over and investigate it. After proposing many solutions to get down there, such as shooting down the well and jumping down a 30-meter drop, which was ridiculous because who would jump down a 30-meter drop? Certainly not anyone on this party. They decided the best mode of getting down there was to go to the cave at the beach, which Argus points out is the best way to access the well. Hey, past me, why couldn't the party just one by one go down the rope to get into the well? Well, you see, future me, that's because there isn't a rope in the well. There's no rope there that they can use to climb down. Okay, but if there's no rope, then how are they getting water out of the well? Excellent question. Some of you D&D veterans might have figured out what I meant with the whole singing and then forgetting things have happened. For those of you who haven't, I'm talking about the False Hydra. The False Hydra is a creature in D&D which is absolutely massive and has the ability to make you forget that you ever saw it and forget anything that is eaten as if it never existed. This is some Doctor Who, Silence, Crack in Time, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey nonsense. I had a whole plan of how this plot was going to work and I just didn't do it. Argus was clearly very dependent on the party, but for some reason didn't offer to kit out the party with a whole bunch of gear, despite conveniently having a whole bunch of gear spare in his house. A house with a fuck ton of beds for one guy. Not to mention me having the dramatic irony of knowing that they're going to have to fight a false Hydra at level 2. And not giving them any gear to do it. Not to mention, it could have been some really interesting development for Argus's character. He chooses not to leave the village, not because he's the village's only protector, but because he's a massive coward, and that's the only reason why he's managed to survive the false Hydra's attacks so many times. Plus, other than the weird singing and the well, there was nothing to indicate that anything was going on. The village had barely been touched, there was no destroyed houses, there was no weirdly empty houses, there was nothing strange in this village that indicated that people were vanishing and people were just forgetting about them. So lesson 4, don't improvise major quests and plot points, you dumb fuck. So in the next session, the party decides to go to the beach, and on the way there, they see a house walking on giant chicken legs across a dirt path. While being completely bewildered by this house, they notice a little gremlin creature leap from the trees onto the leg of the house, climbing up it and then entering into a doorway, which then vanishes. And on the back of this gremlin is a human child. This manages to spark some sort of intrigue in the party. Took them long enough. They chase after the house, which is rapidly getting away from them, and Henry manages to leap onto one of the chicken legs and pull the other guys up. They climb up to the house, but realise that there's no door or windows to get in. Instead, they decide to scale the house, getting all the way up to the roof and hopping down through a chimney. This sparks the first instance of this session's really pointless nat 20s. I told them that they'd have to perform an acrobatics check to safely climb down the chimney. This resulted in both Lilith and Marius getting nat 20s and Henry rolling a 19.
But we could all get 20s and then we just like win or something.
Hey!
I got a nat 20.
I got 19. 2 nat 20s and a 19. Yes.
Well done, boys. Well done for
Hey,
those rolls that you now
you're
no
really,
longer
you're
have.
really dragging the team down, you know, with your low rolls.
They get introduced to Baba Yaga, who is stirring a cauldron filled with some kind of potion. Also, her assistant Gringo, a malformed changeling. I didn't actually realize that changelings were a thing and had a canon appearance in D&D, and how I imagine Gringo was just sort of this brown, pudgy, wart-covered thing that had a big fuck-off mouth. Gringo notices them intruding first and apprehends them, and Baba Yaga just decides, they might be worth my time, and freezes Gringo in place to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. She also takes the baby off Gringo's back and stuffs it in the cauldron, killing it to make a potion. Baba Yaga then scoops out part of her potion and takes a drink of it, resulting in her aging backwards a solid few years. Her posture gets better, her hair looks better, her face looks youthful. She explains that she's been doing this for a very long time, gradually stealing children away from the village and replacing them with changelings, which she can conjure due to having a contract with a demon. But anyway, that's lore that they didn't fully get to. She also drops a couple of other tidbits of lore, for example, that the witch isn't actually evil and she's really just wanting to close off the forest, and the royal family has been sending people into the Fey Forest for far longer than it's been a real thing in the human world. The party completely ignored all of that. After the whole exposition dump that they didn't pay attention to, she says she's got a quest for them. There are 3 children still in that village that she wants to get hold of so she can make her final batch of potions. This should hopefully keep her young long enough so that she can escape the forest and reign terror on Canaloo, as she has already replaced multiple people there with changelings. In exchange for grabbing the 3 kids for her, she offers to drop some mad lore and give a few presents here and there, which the party says, yeah, maybe we'll do that. They're not going to do that. Anyway, beach time. The board game girlies arrive at the beach and discover a bunch of grazing horses, which they find out very quickly can actually talk to them. This is because they're not horses at all, they're actually kelpies. I am fully convinced that the party just got so distracted by the fact that the kelpies can talk to them and they look vaguely horse-shaped that they forgot the reason why they actually went to the beach. I have also now come to the realization that the best way to distract my party from anything is just put a horse in front of them. So they realise the only way to get down from the cliff is to either walk down the cliff side, which is being blocked by a couple of grazing kelpie, climb down the cliff, or take the offer of riding on a kelpie's back in order to get down from there. For any of you who know your folklore, you might know where this is going. Lilith bravely and stupidly decides to go first, getting on a kelpie's back, which jumps off the cliff, which was a full 30-meter drop. However, the kelpie lands safely and softly onto the sand. This is where Lilith realizes he is fucked up, as the kelpie gradually starts walking closer and closer to the ocean, and he can't get off its back. I gradually started nudging the kelpie closer and closer to the ocean, but never really intended for the kelpie to go into the ocean and start drowning Lilith, because I was scared of killing off a player character. So all that really happened was Marius and Henry were trying to figure out a way to get down without hopping on the back of another kelpie, while Lilith was slowly being inched towards an ocean that he was never going to end up in. I mean, it put pressure on the situation, feeling like he was going to end up drowning, but there was never any danger there in the first place. So how do Henry and Marius propose to get down? Well, Marius takes the sensible route and goes down a little ramp that leads directly down to the beach, having to squeeze past a couple of grazing kelpie, but really it was no bother. Henry, on the other hand, jumps off the cliff. Seeing that the kelpie slowly dropped onto the sand and was perfectly fine, he thought he could just do the same. Turns out no, he jumps off a cliff, and is immediately downed. So now Marius has to squeeze by 2 Kelpie, save Henry before he dies from rolling too many failed death saves, and save Lilith from drowning, but he wasn't actually going to drown. Anyway, it didn't really matter because Lilith managed to save himself anyway by rolling a high wisdom save, so good for him. So, suspicious Kelpies are dealt with, and Henry rolls a nat 20 to discover sand is sand.
I'd like to do an Arcana on the sand.
You can do an Arcana on the sand.
It's sand.
Nat 20. It's sand.
20.
Nice nat 20 on inspecting sand.
They walk further up the beach, encountering a rundown shack which has the skeleton of a gnome in it, and a whole bunch of diary entries depicting how he was driven mad by the mermaids outside, and that he was trying to complete some kind of strange ritual. Marius and Henry go up to the mermaids like, "Hey, how's it going? Hot fish?" They completely failed at flirting in every regard. Marius went first, he failed at flirting, and then Henry tried to back him up and he failed at flirting. So they went inside the shack and tried to cut their losses. They discover a basement in which it looks like the gnome was in the process of assembling some kind of ritual. This was a ritual for what I called the Legiment of Time, which was a magical item that could answer any question that they proposed. However, it only had 12 charges. Not that that mattered, they used about 4 of them and never touched the book again. I'll be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if Lilith is watching this video and then messages me later saying, yeah, we completely forgot about the Legiment of Time was even a thing. So the Legiment of Time requires 2 extra skulls to complete the ritual. 2 extra unique skulls, that is. And there was already an elf there, but there wasn't any human, so they started debating which one of them was going to hand over their skull. Conveniently enough, there wasn't a mermaid skull and there wasn't a gnome skull, at least not one they could identify. So they took They took the moan skull. They took the gnome skull and placed that on one of the points, and the final point they had to go up to the mermaids and convince them to hand over one of their dead friends in order to complete a weird ritual. Ludwig was the one with the highest charisma who went over to flirt with the mermaids. Keep in mind, this is someone who is very asexual and very much does not want to be flirted with. So he was repeatedly throwing up in his own mouth. So for some reason I just didn't let him charisma check through part of this conversation, so I just straight up rejected his idea to do anything. And then rather than try to subtly flirt with the mermaids, instead he resorts to plan B, which is pull out a gun and threaten to fucking murder them. Which surprisingly works. The intimidation check passes and he figures out where the graves of the mermaids are, which are along the beaches. However, they discover that one of the graves, in fact a few of the graves, aren't harbouring mermaids, but the eaten corpses of multiple other species. Man, it sure would be really cool if I did anything with the fact that there are half-eaten dead corpses in the sand where the mermaids are sitting. So with the Legiment of Time ritual completed, they immediately waste 2 charges on stupid questions.
Do we have any other questions we want to ask the magical book?
If the book answers this, I'm going to shoot you.
Well, unfortunately.
I'm not gonna lie, the Legiment of Time was a very last-minute idea. I should have made it attuned to one of them as a cursed item, and regardless of whether they soundproofed it or not, it would answer their questions. That way, it would force the person holding it to try and avoid asking any questions that could result in the Legiment of Time telling them the answer, so that they could save the charges for something more important. But what bothers me more is that this beach was so dull. The mermaids barely did anything, the kelpies barely did anything, the gnome barely did anything. I get that he was dead, but he could have been more than just a plot device. Honestly, I'm not surprised that the party kind of stopped caring about engaging with the world after this, because the world wasn't engaging with them. So anyway, having acquired the Legiment of Time, they leave the beach and come to the Fey portal that Marianne Sparkle Bumbleshine was actually talking about. And they walk right past it. I had this whole thing planned out, this like trial of the Fey, and they were going to talk to the King of the Fey and all of this stuff, and they walk past it. Like, for fuck's sake, guys. Eventually, they get back to the village, and have you noticed that they might not have done something that they originally intended to do? I think this was the point where I really started to feel a bit burnt out on the campaign, and very soon it's going to become exceedingly obvious why. So, lesson 5. If the party isn't engaging in the world, force them to engage in the world. Force them into events. Force them into combat. Make their actions have consequences. And lesson 5.1, don't be afraid to just fucking kill someone. So we return to the village, and people are freaking out because multiple children have now gone missing, and no one knows where they are. Argus notices the party has come back and approaches them asking if they can help find the missing children, and the party goes, yeah, Sure, in reality, this was I literally do not care about these NPCs. We are here to find and kill the witch, and that is it. And nothing is going to stand between us and that goal. I don't care about this side plot. That was great to hear. They were completely set on this goal of murdering the witch, even though multiple people in the story so far have said that the witch isn't actually a bad person, and the royal family is hiding much more than they are letting on. I know veteran DMs right now are probably screaming at their screen, and I 100% should have just paused, given everyone a recap, and said, guys, can you just give a fuck about the plot? Because it's really demotivating hearing you just say, I don't care about the NPCs, and not having listened to any of the lore that I have dumped. Anyway, they leave the village, fight some spiderlings, yada yada, same old, and then they end up at the farm. The farm clearly has not been preserved for a long ass time. All the crops around the area are rotting or dead, and the farmhouse itself looks raggedy and worn down. They decide to go up to some scarecrows, which I accidentally called skeletons, and Lilith has not let me forget it since. When they try and introduce themselves, the skeleton immediately starts attacking them, to which they freak out and go around to the next skeleton in the next field over and immediately try and kill that thing. Slight issue, that skeleton was actually scripted to not be evil and be a really nice and helpful guy. A nice and helpful guy that they can't heal. Did I mention that they shot him so badly that he was left on 1 health? The Scarecrow's name was Dayton. He was a former criminal that got released and determined to turn his life around. He joined the farm and, as such, really valued the time he spent there along with the family. He valued it so much, in fact, that he kept working even while everyone else was struggling with starvation and disease and other certain things. His soul managed to cling on to the nearest scarecrow, and he's kind of just been stuck there ever since. He's lost his mind a little bit, but Ents come by every now and then to chat to him. The party decide to break their way into the house using the key under the doormat. It's a complete mess, completely disheveled, and looks like it's been abandoned for a good few years. However, what they do manage to find is a very nice sword and 2 very fancy hand crossbows. Downside though, there's a lot of corpses. Downside, those corpses aren't exactly dead. Finally we reach maybe the 4th, maybe 5th enemy in this entire campaign. These enemies were called the Terrible Fates. This is what happens in my little D&D world when someone dies in an incredibly tragic way and their spirit is still angry about it. The spirit latches onto the body and embodies what killed them. For example, in the house it was starvation and disease, in the river alongside the farm it was drowning, and in the barn house it was something. If people end up getting too close to them, the spirit awakens the corpse and attacks the person, being able to siphon off their life force in order to maintain their body. Despite the lore I just gave you, somehow these were also tied to the Fae. I didn't really, properly flesh them out. I just had the idea of this would be really cool to have, zombies with magical Fae powers, but it was never properly explained. The only real tie to the Fae is that the effects that they deal when they're too close to you don't affect Fae kind. So while Henry and Marius are being poisoned and losing their bonus actions because they're too hungry to act, Lilith is completely fine and handles this like it's no problem whatsoever. However, I will admit that I did keep forgetting that Lilith was Fae kind because they're an elf. I also forgot that elves don't need to sleep multiple times, and every time they would yell at me because I'm a forgetful moron, which completely deserved. Anyway, despite the fact that they're sick and hungry throughout most of this fight, they manage to clear out the entire house, and things really start becoming a problem when they get pinned in a very small room with 2 of these terrible fates. But ultimately, they get through it with no casualties. They decide to long rest in the house, and who else should guard the door except Dayton, the scarecrow on 1 health. Is it any surprise that he fucking died? Anyway, Dayton is killed, Lilith finds out and is incredibly pissed because, I don't know what he expected to happen, but he really liked Dayton. So what is a reasonable person to do? Well, he solos the enemy and proceeds to stamp on its corpse for the next 4 hours. 4 straight hours of the remaining long rest of Lilith just stomping down repeatedly on this dead corpse until it is nothing but a smear on the wall and floor. After the session, they leave the farmhouse, and that is the final session of this entire D&D campaign. I admitted to them that I was really burnt out on it, and I didn't really feel like continuing. After all, it felt very pointless, considering they weren't really engaging with any of the story, but honestly, I don't blame them since I didn't do the best job of setting things up, as you can probably tell. So the final lesson 6. Do recaps and do-overs, because it's going to be a lot more enjoyable for both you and the party if you realize, whoops, we missed something, let's just go back and do it and pretend like none of this ever happened. So that concludes the technically first campaign that I ever properly ran. I feel like it really ended for two reasons. Number one is that I was really frustrated on how I ran it. There was a bunch of plot points that I came up with later that I just never explained. I described things very poorly, I improvised way too much, and we had to retcon fuck tons of things. The second thing is I didn't really see any point in continuing a campaign where no one was engaging with the plot. I mean, there were multiple times where I said, here is a thing that you can interact with, here is some lore, here is a side quest, and the best I usually got was, yeah, we'll maybe do it. If I was to run this campaign again, I'd be a lot more railroady. I'd definitely have given Henry more equipment so he's less useless and given him some spell scrolls and reworked his character sheet a bit. Definitely would have done a session 0 and definitely would not have held back on the enemy counts. I'd love to do this campaign again. I think it would be great fun to try again. I just think I need to be more all in with everything. I mean, seriously, one enemy that can't do anything if it's being observed against 3 people. Moral of the story, if you're new to DMing, don't be afraid to fuck with your players and railroad them when needed. You don't want to go into the world of the fairies? Well, that's too bad, because you gave the fairies your name, and therefore they have power over you. You threaten the mermaids with a gun? Well, they certainly aren't happy about that, and they're ready to fucking pounce. Also, I 100% recommend just following a pre-constructed campaign if you're doing this for the first time, because it'll just be so much easier, and everything will already be laid out for you rather than you having to create everything yourself. I mean, after this, I did make a Slay the Spire D&D campaign, but do as I say, not as I do. But as much as I rag on myself and my players for how the campaign went, I really enjoyed the campaign itself. I really enjoyed being a DM and being able to stretch my creative writing muscles, and at the end of the day, I realized that I enjoy being a DM far more than I'm being a player. So that was the story of my first time ever DMing a proper campaign. A tale of being just really bad at everything. But that's a good thing, because you gotta be bad at things. That's how you learn new things. You know, it's like Confucius once said, you gotta suck ass before you can eat ass, or something like that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a garden to go organise.